Okay, I'm making a new video today. Um, the last few videos that I released, for example, there is nothing to get in life and rambling about meaning and purpose. Both of those kind of had, they were different videos, but there were similar essences and themes. And I feel like it was also similar to one of my videos where I spoke a bit about solipsism and existential boredom. And I wanted to essentially speak a bit about boredom or make a video specifically about that because it's something that I have been grappling with a lot recently. But at the same time as I have been grappling with it, um, I've been gaining new insight on boredom and what actually creates it and so on and so forth. So that's what I want to kind of cover in this video. Essentially, I feel like many of you could relate to the feeling. I could kind of describe it to you. It almost feels like when you look around in life, you look around and it feels like you've already squeezed the juice out of all the fruit. There's no more juice left to be squeezed, essentially. That's kind of the analogy of what it kind of feels like. You have these kind of general trends where I don't know if it's just on my algorithm, my feed, but it seems that not just me, but many other people, for example, like many of the big entertainment industries, such as gaming and cinema and theater and all of this kind of stuff, it's all slowly diminishing because people are just starting to get tired of gaming. They're getting tired of the films that they've been seeing because it's like at a certain point the potential for we enjoy surprises and new experiencing new phenomena. That's why it was very easy for us to enjoy everything and be just delighted as a child because there was so much you hadn't experienced yet. There were so many new experiences for you still to have. And therefore everything was fun to you because everything was new, everything was a surprise, and that's essentially what entertains us. And where we get bored, you can realize, for example, in a monotonous job or repetitive task, that's when you get bored because it's just the same thing over and over and it's a loop. There's no new stimulation. So essentially with a lot of these films and TV shows or these games, at a certain point, yes, they are new and innovating things, but at a certain point it becomes so saturated to where everything becomes a copy of a copy, maybe change 1 or 2% and then just repackage and rebrand it. And then you buy it again next year in this kind of subscription loop. And that's the new capitalistic, like, modus operandi. It's the new, it's not even just a one-time thing. It's the returning customer of the subscription-based thing where they just regurgitate the same product, change like a few things to make it seem like it's completely new, but it's the same thing. And before we was like the masses, we was falling for this, right? But now we're starting to become privy to that, and we're starting to catch on to that. And of course, there was a lot more originality back, like in past decades, because, for example, with gaming was a new industry. There hadn't been that many. There were so many games that hadn't been created yet, to where every single new game is this crazy new game, right? Whereas now every game that comes out is just some kind of copy or some kind of imitation of something prior to that, right? And that's what is kind of getting people bored of all this stuff, because there's not enough variety anymore, and because a lot of the variety, it seems that has been, as I said, the juice has already been squeezed. So I feel like a lot of people just feel bored nowadays. And I do think that there is still a lot of potential. Like there could always be, for example, new games or new TV shows or just a completely new technology that allows for a completely new type of stimulation or entertainment or whatever. But yeah, that's just some stuff that I've been seeing recently. And that's, of course, those analogies and those examples are just kind of physical examples for like everyday human masses and so on. But especially like as an individual as well, if you're on the spiritual path or you're seeking for truth. Like for me, seeking for truth and seeking enlightenment or all this kind of stuff, all these mind bending topics and stuff, it was very exciting for me before, when I still was less aware of the truth compared to how I am now. Because there was always something to look forward to. There was always something that I didn't understand yet, which I could look forward to understanding at a point in time. There was always, essentially it's the mystery. It's the mystery, the chase of the unknown and discovering. Imagine like your bubble is your known, and then expanding your bubble, and everything around you is unknown. And the more you expand, the more you're kind of swallowing up the unknown, and it's becoming part of your domain of everything that you know. But then imagine you expand so far that it gets tricky, because the way I'm explaining it, it makes it seem like there's a limited amount that there is to know, and you just need to expand a certain amount and then you will know everything. But it doesn't really work like that. It's kind of like you expand and expand, but you can't really expand to encapsulate everything, because as you expand, like the field is also expanding. So it's more like you're not expanding and then at some point you know everything. It's more like a quantum leap. And as I've explained in many of my past, like very few first videos, when I'm saying like knowing everything or something like that, I'm not really speaking about specific details like, what happened on Tuesday in 1963. It's more of the analogy, for example, if you was to zoom out into space, like you went out into space and you could see the whole of the earth, you wouldn't be able to see your specific town or your specific house, because you're so zoomed out that you can see the whole of earth, but it kind of loses resolution. So that's kind of what it's like when you zoom out so far and you kind of see the whole truth. You do genuinely know everything, but it's just that it's not really like in specific detail to where you would be able to predict what's going to happen in 5 years from now or something, because that's just a minute detail of the dream, which is an unreal dream. So like the whole thing that you're knowing is you're realizing that the whole thing is a dream, and you're realizing the truth. So realizing the truth is not realizing the details of the fake dream, which isn't even real anyway. You're realizing that it's fake. That's what you're realizing. You're not realizing, like, how does the fake dream operate? You do gain more understanding of the like mechanisms of the dream as a result anyway, but it's not really like becoming self-realized or enlightened or something is not really going to make you like increase generalized knowledge that humans would kind of use to measure. Like, for example, if you went on some game show and they're asking you random questions like, who was the president in, and like, who was the Chinese president in back in 1950s or something, and then they're using that as a measurement of like how intelligent you are or something like that, or how much you know. When those are just kind of random, you're just memorizing data. That's it. That's not nothing to do with real intelligence. Um, yeah, see, but I'm going a bit on a tangent because I came from boredom, right? Essentially, essentially, what I myself have been experiencing and many other people have been experiencing as they get tired of these carbon copies and so on and so forth, and then you start to feel bored more often than you do feel excited. Whereas that was the inverse when you was younger. Like if you're comparing to how it was when you were younger, it may seem like now you're more bored. Like it's more often that you're bored than that you're genuinely excited. Whereas it might have been inverse in the past, right? And when you experience life like that, at that particular time, it may then begin to appear to you as if boredom is your natural state or your baseline. Um, and that if you're not constantly stimulating yourself with something, then you will just by default be bored. That's what it begins to feel like, when that's actually false. See, because boredom and excitement is already a duality, like on a sine wave oscillating, and you need the contrast between each other to even create each other. Like you need excitement to have boredom, and you need boredom to have excitement. But boredom is not the baseline. Do you see that? Like it's not like boredom is not the baseline. Boredom is actually below the baseline. It's just that, for example, if this is your baseline and this is your sine wave, if you essentially with these new technologies like the internet and gaming and all these things where we was playing new games every single year and was watching new TV shows, new movies, like every year was getting stimulated. So we was kind of getting so stimulated that was getting so peaked above the baseline that we began to think that that was our baseline. That was our perceived baseline, but it wasn't our actual baseline. And now when we're like crashing down, because you have to remember in every wave and every sine wave, there's like micro and macro waves. You can learn all of this in investing and trading and all this stuff, but there's micro and macro waves. So within one like wave, you can say like one large wave is being created of smaller waves, right? And even those small waves, you could zoom in, are being created by smaller waves. And even that large wave is just actually creating, like it's just a mini wave within a larger wave, so to speak. So essentially, all that time we was actually above our baseline from all the stimulation. Now we're kind of crashing below, and we're getting the backlash of all that overstimulation. And now when we're down here, and this is our new perceived baseline, we're actually below the baseline, but because we're like we've been down here for so long now, because we're kind of getting that backlash of all that overstimulation. Like boredom and being below the baseline now feels like the baseline, if you get what I'm saying, until eventually it'll flip again. But see, it's all about comparison and relativity and like where you're measuring from, right? But boredom is not your baseline. And yeah, the whole point where because I was using like TV shows and all that stuff as just analogy for a normal like human kind of mass population, and then also for certain individuals who are into spirituality and so on. Like why I even went off on that tangent was because like if that is what you're interested in, then when you're not enlightened, then there's always something to chase and always something new to learn. Then that can still be exciting, and you're still kind of chasing the next thing. But then imagine you actually do start getting to higher levels where you understand more than you don't understand. And then it gets to a point to where there's not really, even from there's not really any juice left to squeeze. So when you're kind of coming from it from that angle, then it will appear as if you're bound or you're doomed to eternal boredom. But actually, and that's kind of how it's been seeming to me and how it's been feeling, at least on the surface, to where it just feels like there's nothing that can kind of stimulate me anymore. There's nothing that could like, I don't know. Like everything just seems too shallow on the surface. Like I can't even like get deep enough. But what I've been noticing more and more is that you see that boredom, right? Boredom is only possible if there is a subconscious demand that you're making, right? Like if you didn't want anything in particular, if you didn't have any like particular preferred conditions or a subtle desire that you wanted it subtly to be this way, not that way. If you didn't have any of that, it would be impossible to be bored. See, it's only possible like if you're suffering from experiencing a lot of boredom, a lot of this kind of stuff recently, you're actually inflicting that on yourself. It's very hard to notice it, but there's actually a subtle underlying demand that you have. You've been, especially because we've been spoiled from all this new technology and stimulation, that you've kind of come to a point to where now you expect to be entertained at all times. You expect there always to be something new, always something exciting, always something fun, always something good. Like at all times, which is impossible. It's genuinely impossible because remember, all those things are like dualities and they're only created in contrast to their opposites. But see, when you start identifying what you believe your baseline to be, what actually your peak is, then even being at your baseline is going to seem down. Do you get what I'm saying? If you start getting used to the peak and you want to be at the peak all the time, even just being at your baseline is down. Never mind when you're below your baseline. That's going to be pure suffering, you see? So it's all about kind of like where you're measuring. And you need to actually consciously notice that you're doing this to yourself and consciously start to reprogram and realize that like you're subtly always bringing your expectation above the baseline, which is always kind of like that illusion, and that delusion can be like life can reinforce that and make it seem like you're correct. Like that life is always high, like you're always flying high all the time. It will seem that way, but only for a particular time, and eventually it's going to eclipse. That's the way time just works. It always, like the truth, like time is truth unfolding. So you could rest in a delusion for a certain time, but then you're going to get crashed. So it's more wise to just align yourself with the truth in the first place so you never have to get crashed. Because you're never going to be artificially pumped. You're only going to really be up if you actually are up. You see? So yeah, it's your subtle demand to be entertained at all times that is causing you to be bored, because your expectations never being hit. It can be hit certain time, but only like small amount of time, because your expectation is above what reality is. See, so you're always going to be punished for your discretion between like how you expect to perceive reality compared to what reality actually is. Whether your expectation is above or below, you're still going to be kind of punished to some degree, or like you're going to experience a backlash for your misperception. And it's not like, oh, there's a evil God punishing you. It's that you're actually punishing yourself by your own actions, because you're ignoring the truth. That's what ignorance really means, is that there's the truth, you see it, but you're ignoring it because you want it to be some other way. Forget how you want it to be and look at the way that it is. And then if you start aligning yourself accordingly, then life is going to treat you well, because everything's just going to be like, you're going to be kind of flowing with the current of life. You're not going to be kind of like trying to swim against the current. One sec. So yeah, you just need to, obviously there's all these trends of dopamine detox as well and all that stuff. See, that's kind of like going to the other side of the extreme and then trying to balance out all that overstimulation. So to some degree, that stuff would actually help dopamine detox and all that. But those like, because the mind likes to go extreme. Like if you've been too extreme on overstimulation, the mind likes to flip completely to the other side as well. It likes to do extreme and drastic moves, which it in the end can't sustain anyway. Like how many times have you made like an extreme New Year's resolution and you couldn't sustain it? You could only sustain it for like maybe 1 or 2 days. See, that's what I'm talking about. The more aligned you are with truth, or the more your vision is aligned with truth, the more it will like withstand the test of time. The more deluded you are, then eventually your delusion has to get eclipsed. That's when your backlash is going to come. That's karma. And it's you doing it to yourself. So yeah, the reason why you're getting bored with life is because you expect too much of life. And that may sound like a bitter, harsh truth. Like you might like, what? Like no, I'm not expecting too much. Like I'm expecting the bare minimum, and so on and so forth. But no, that's because you've become so accustomed to the luxuries of life that you overlook all the stuff that you've been blessed with, and you're only looking at and focusing at the things that are wrong and judging those. And then that way you're always gonna, no matter what reality you're in, there's gonna be something wrong with it. Because as I've explained before in the past, there cannot be any complete manifested realities. Any reality that manifests and appears for someone, a subject to experience, like a human or an alien or a cat or a dog or anything. Like if you have a point of view and you're within like an external physical world as a subject looking at objects, if you're in, it doesn't matter if it's in an alternate universe over there or whatever, but if there's a subject, there's an object, there's an environment, and there's agents, then it's impossible for it to be complete. It has to necessarily be incomplete and always unfolding, which is what will give it the appearance of time, even though time doesn't exist. But it has to always be incomplete and unfolding. Because if it's complete, then there can't be even a direction, or there can't even be progression. It will just be like frozen. Like imagine we froze time. Could anything happen? Could we live life? Could we do stuff if we was frozen in time? No, it's impossible. So yeah, and the reason why I was explaining that boredom is not your baseline, because I even kind of fell into that trap as well myself, where I started to think like, like if you just are at your baseline, then that's just kind of boredom, and that's the whole reason why we're always trying to deviate from that. But realize that if like boredom was absolute, then you would be bored at all times. And realize that even if you've been experiencing way more boredom recently than you did in prior years or anything like that, realize that you're not bored all the time. And in fact, it's impossible to feel bored all the time, because there wouldn't even be a distinction anymore. And you wouldn't even be able to call it boredom or anything. You would just call it reality. So you can only, you're even if you're experiencing a lot of boredom recently, you're still only experiencing boredom at certain times. So it's not absolute. It's not really like more true than anything else. So just realize that boredom is also just another deviation, oscillation away from the true baseline. And in a sense, boredom is the opposite to excitement. And you see, you're not excited all the time, and neither are you bored all the time. You see, so neither of those are completely true, and you shouldn't expect to be excited all the time and always have something to look forward to. And also don't fall into the trap of believing that you're always bored when you do experience boredom. Because like, recognize that when you actually are feeling bored, and realize, oh, like I'm feeling bored now, but I wasn't feeling bored a few hours ago, or I didn't feel bored yesterday. So this is just a passing phase, and just realize that life always has these mood swings, and you just have to kind of ride the wave. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave that one there. And yeah, another point I wanted to make as well is it was actually, I was gonna make another video about that, but it actually links in well with this. Is kind of the feeling at the same time with that boredom feeling. There's also it's all kind of in the same category, where this depression feeling, or this feeling of despair in some sense. And one sec, let me just find my notes on that. Essentially, what you have to realize is that this despair feeling, or even that boredom feeling, one of the core assumptions that the mind is thinking at that point in time when you're experiencing that is essentially it's stemmed in a loss of hope as well. And I'm not saying that you should be hopeful or anything like that, but essentially, I feel like despair and these sorts of down negative emotions, it always feels like at that point in time, same way how I was explaining how it feels like the juice has been squeezed out of the fruit, it always feels like the best moments are already in the past. Like it feels like you've already hit your peak back then, and now you're only on like your downfall, essentially. It feels to you like there's nothing, there's no longer anything to look forward to in the future. It feels like all the peaks have already been experienced, and now all that's left to experience are valleys. But realize that you can never be in an infinite valley. The valley is relative, and realize that there always necessarily has to be more peaks in the future. So no matter how boring the games or like the TV shows or your life feels now, where you're going back to the same workplace, seeing the same people in the same building, in the same cubicle or something like that. Like no matter how much it seems like you're gonna stay trapped in that forever, and there's no good things ahead of you, realize that that's always an illusion. There's always something good ahead. Maybe not like something amazing, but realize that it's impossible to be below the baseline forever. That's something that you really have to be conscious of at all times, because that's going to help you essentially escape, even though you're going to necessarily escape the valleys, but that's going to help you be conscious of the fact that you are in a valley when you are in a valley. Because what most people don't realize is that they are in a valley, but they think that like when you're in a valley, it doesn't just feel like, oh, I'm just in a bad mood right now. That feels like that's just your reality. That just feels like, no, this is just how it is. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm just having like a little down day. It feels like, no, it's like this forever. It's going to be like this forever. But that's the illusion. And that's what I'm trying to help you break out of, is that if you start to become aware that, yes, like all the things that you do for fun, that they never last. Like you have a peak, but then you always come back to baseline. That's quite sad, right? You feel like, oh, I wish I could ride that wave forever. I wish I could always be at the peak. Okay, yes, you could say it's a sad truth that no matter like what car you get or how big your house you get, eventually you're gonna get accustomed to it, right? And it's just gonna feel normal to you. As much as that's true, so no peaks are always there, but it's the same for it's the same for the valleys. See, some people they see, oh yeah, the peaks are impermanent, but then they start to act as if the valley is permanent. And that's what I was explaining. They start to almost contextualize like as if the valley is their baseline, when that's false. Even the valleys are also impermanent. So no matter how bad you're feeling now, there's always has to be some kind of compromise in the future. If you really are below in the baseline and you really are feeling shit right now, then realize that it's genuinely impossible for it to remain that way at all times. There has to always be some kind of relief or some kind of bounce back. Same way, when you're at the peak, there's going to have to be some kind of equalizing and bringing you back down to earth. See, that's just the nature of the beast. So essentially, also don't get trapped in this idea of always just comparing to your past and imagining that your past was so amazing and that all the good times are back then and there's nothing to look forward to now. See, because excitement and enjoyment, a lot of this is tied in with having something to look forward to. And when you feel like all hope is lost and there's nothing good to look forward to and that we're just going to keep on degenerating down, then you're going to even be causing yourself even more suffering because of that extra illusion that's like layered on top of the pain that you're already feeling. See, escaping pain is impossible, but pain is always just going to be like, some days you feel pain, like sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. Yes, that's life, right? But if you're not aware that all of it is transitory and in comparison to each other, then you may start to buy into the idea that essentially the pain and the suffering or the downside is the only real thing, and that all your good experiences are all just fake or you know what I'm saying, just copium or something, when actually no. See, and then you're not even gonna enjoy your peaks at that point as well. So it's just a double loss. So I just wanted to make that last little point.